YouTube right now.
Awesome.
We are going out into the whole wide world. Father Mike, I am so glad that you joined us tonight. We are so honored to have you.
Oh, gosh, I'm honored. Sorry, I just don't want to interrupt you. I'm honored to be here.
You were awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for listening. For those of you who are tuning in, we see there's people already tapping in. This is part 2 of the Aquinas Institute for Catholic Thought's online speaker series for 2020. And we are so honored tonight to welcome Father Mike Schmitz into our little virtual world. So I am coming to you from Boulder, Colorado. And I am right across the street from the University of Colorado, the Aquinas Institute for Catholic Thought. Some of you are familiar with us. Some of you have taken part in some of our stuff. We do a speaker series every year, but this year it's a little bit different. A whole bunch of circumstances conspired to put us online, which is hard in many ways because I really miss seeing everybody in person. I miss the chance to see you, Father Mike, face to face. But at the same time, it's allowed, so the Lord has opened doors and we're able to welcome some speakers that we might not have been able to do otherwise. You have a full packed schedule doing ministry in Minnesota. So you were able to join us tonight because we're able to do it this way. So we're so grateful for that. Couple heads up, our part 2 is coming up on November 19th, Thursday, November 19th at 7 p.m. And we're going to be welcoming J.D. Flynn, who's the editor-in-chief of Catholic News Agency, who's going to be talking about fake news and spiritual exhaustion, which definitely hits close to home, I think, for a lot of us. So tune in for that. That's going to be on all the same platforms. If you don't know who we are, the Aquinas Institute for Catholic Thought is the intellectual formation branch of the St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic Ministry at the University of Colorado. And so our job is to bring the richness of the Catholic intellectual tradition to a big secular university and community. And we want to be a part of the conversation that's happening in our world, on our universities, in our public squares. So that's what we're here to do. And again, we're doing it in a virtual way tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a question that has been very difficult for a lot of us, and I don't know the answers to it. And so I'm hoping, Father Mike, you can elucidate us a little bit, at least on some of your reflections. The University of Colorado is just coming out of a pretty intense period of quarantine. There was a huge spike in numbers of COVID, and so we pretty much went on lockdown after an already pretty intense lockdown prior to that. And so we have students dealing with isolation and fear and confusion and all sorts of other things going on. And so tonight we want to talk about what it actually means and looks like to try to build community in this atmosphere and friendships and what that looks like. So I can't think of a better person to welcome into this conversation than Father Mike Schmitz. So Father Mike Schmitz is the director of youth and young adult ministry in the Diocese of Duluth, Minnesota. And he's also the chaplain of the University of Minnesota Duluth's Newman Center. He offers weekly homilies. His stuff is on iTunes and bulldogcatholic.org. He's got a podcast that I started listening to every week. He's appeared in all sorts of programs for young people and young adults and adults through Ascension Press. And he has a whole ton of great little short videos on Ascension Presents that there's so many of them. And there's so many times that I turn to these videos. I'm like, I wonder what Father Mike has to say about that. And they're so great. So I'm grateful for that. He's got a wonderful book that I had sitting in front of me that I put aside so that I don't have the title in front of me. Yes, I do. It's called Made for Love. So absolutely check that out. It's through Ignatius Press and the Augustine Institute. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Father Mike Schmitz. Father Mike.
Thank you so much. Should I say Dr. Powell? Because I don't even know.
You can say whatever you want to.
I want to be like...
I make everybody call me Dr. Powell, and if they don't...
I want to be as respectful as possible, but I'm like, I just also am so grateful for you and for everything that you're doing, not only during the school year, but also in the summertime. We've had so many students go out and be part of Camp Wojtyła that I'm just like, I don't know what hat to put on you, because I'm like, gosh, he just like so incredible. So I'm honored to be with you and be with your students at UC Boulder and the Thomas Aquinas. Yeah, I remember years ago I came across what you guys are doing with, is it the Aquinas Institute? Or how would you say, what's the exact?
So it's the Aquinas Institute for Catholic Thought.
Yes,
and we always kind of give the whole title because everyone mixes us up with the wonderful Augustine Institute, which is also in Denver.
The wonderful Augustine, yes, exactly. But I remember I saw a brochure for the Aquinas Institute for Catholic Thought, and I thought, oh my gosh, they have got things like tight going on, like this really incredible ministry. So I saw it years ago, and I was like, this is amazing, and I'm glad you're carrying the torch forward right now.
It's great. And, I have a lot of academic roles with the University of Colorado itself. And the university itself has been very welcoming to the Catholic intellectual tradition and letting us be a part of the conversation. So it's, God has blessed it tremendously, and we're really blessed to be here. And Camp Wojtyła, a lot of people have asked, and so maybe some of you are wondering, we are smack in the middle of some really intense forest fires that are happening here in Boulder County. And we have been kind of on pins and needles the last couple of days about whether the property is going to make it out of this. And so as of now, everything is still standing up at Camp Wojtyła, but keep us in your prayers if we could. That's been, and everybody, there's been a lot of people who've lost their homes in the last couple of days, and a lot of firefighters who are doing really brave, intense work up in the mountains. As we watch, I can literally see out of my office the smoke and the burning. So it's keep us in your prayers.
Definitely will.
Well, Father Mike, we also, I should add, have a small group of our students who are gathered in another building just up the street. They're all socially distanced and wearing masks, but this is one of the first relatively small but experiences of community for them to have too. So they're watching us and our conversation on live stream, and they're going to pipe in toward the tail end, if that's okay, with just a couple questions, comments they would love to post to you. So that is coming up. But without further ado, I do want to jump in to tonight. So many people know and love you. You are renowned in the Catholic world in so many ways. But for those folks who don't know who you are, would you mind just taking just a couple minutes, tell us about your story, how you came to the priesthood, and just where you're coming from?
Yeah, just I guess really briefly. I was born in Chicago, and I lived there for 9 months, and then my parents moved. My dad was finishing up his residency at Cook County General Hospital, and I have 3 older siblings, and so I'm the 4th of 6 total. But I was born there, and then my parents, they both grew up in Minnesota, but in roughly the kind of the Twin Cities area. And when it was time for my dad to start his medical practice, they said, well, where do you want to live? They talked with each other, and which is good to do as a married couple. And they knew they wanted to live in Minnesota, but they didn't want to live in the Twin Cities. And they said, well, where did you vacation when you were growing up? And they both vacation in this area of Minnesota, kind of northern Minnesota, called the Brainerd Lakes area. Yeah. And so they said, why don't we just live where we used to love to go on vacation as kids? And so that's what they did. They moved to a town called Brainerd, which is Minnesotans consider it northern Minnesota, but it's actually right in the center of the state. It's just north of the Twin Cities. And so they call it northern. So I grew up in a tourist area, which is just I didn't realize at the time, but I've been reflecting on it, more and more recently, with maybe say the last 10 years, how that affected, it just shaped me. That sense of like that excitement, that sense of people want to come to where you are, and even this like gratitude of I live where people vacation. Like that just, I mean, I imagine in Colorado, kind of a similar thing where it's like everyone when they think of the mountains, they think of where you are right now in Boulder. That's what they imagine. And so it just it shaped me in a way of just gratitude for even the smallest of things, meaning like the geographic area in which I was raised. Anyways, absolutely. So my parents were both Catholic.
Whenever my kids are acting up and acting ungrateful, I always do the same thing. I'm like, do you realize that you live in a place where people come on vacation?
Exactly. Look out the window right now.
Look how beautiful it is. Yeah. So I'm probably scarring them. I'm doing the opposite than your parents.
But that my parents did the same thing. I mean, I remember my first. So I worked at my dad's clinic for years before I could actually get a job where I had a W-2. But I got hired as soon as I could. Like I was 15, I wanted to work. I got hired at a candy store. It was a candy and ice cream shop in a town called Nisswa, Minnesota, which is it shuts down in the winter. I mean, there's like 2 or 3 stores that are open in the winter because it's like complete tourist town. And my first summer that I worked there, I really wanted to work. I really wanted to make money. I wanted to have a job. I wanted to be productive. But my first summer I worked there, I was so angry at all the customers when they came in because I would think they would come in on the most beautiful days, and I'd be resentful that I was working when it was gorgeous outside. And I'd be thinking, exactly, why are you in town? You should be on the lake. It's 85 degrees outside. Why are you here? I'm stuck here. I had a conversion actually of heart simultaneous with my conversion to the Lord, where after I got done with that summer of working and kind of somewhat resenting it, I went on vacation myself in Colorado. Like, this is no lie, to a little town. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Vale. And
I was so excited for some obscure town. I know where that is. Yeah.
No, so Vale and Beaver Creek, that's where my parents, like my family, I don't know why it was. My parents did not grow up skiing, but they like got it into their heads at some point in my early childhood that like where we need to go is we need to go to Vale and Beaver Creek every winter. And so it was the biggest, one of the great gifts. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I imagine people in Colorado have experienced this, where you're a tourist and you're on vacation and you're going to one of like the shops up there in those rarefied areas. And when you walk in, the people who are working there have this look of like, so why should we help you? Like, prove to us how you are worthy of us serving you and showing you selling to you what we have here. And I remember being so like kind of embarrassed, and I don't want to overuse the word, but kind of humiliated of like, oh, you know, my family's loud. We have as I said, 6 kids, 2 parents, all 8 of us. Well, all 7 of them loud. I'm the quiet one. And we would go in, I'd be so embarrassed. And these clerks would look at us like you're the worst. And I remember thinking, wait a second, I'm 15 at the time, 15 and a half. I'm thinking, wait a second, that's what I did last summer to all these people coming in who are tourists. I'm like, I don't want to be that person. So the next year, it was, again, conversion. It was this sense of like thinking about yourself completely and being like completely self-absorbed to this moment of my job is to serve them. Like my job, not just to give them ice cream, not just to give them candy. My job is to give them the best vacation they've had. So I know what's going to happen. What's going to come with a family's going to walk in, and there's going to be the annoying little brother. He's going to run around all over the place. And the older sister who's going to be like, she's going to grab her arm like, this is so dumb, like whatever. And the dad is going to be making all these jokes to the clerks behind the counter and like all these puns and all these whatever. He's going to be the guy, you know, and the mom is just going to be frazzled trying to bring everyone in. And I say, my job then is not just to give them candy, not just to give them ice cream. My job is to laugh at the dad's jokes, is to say, no problem about the little boy. My job is to give attention to the teenage girl and say like, no, your family's cool. Don't worry about this. And to reassure the mom. Like, and everything changed. And I loved, from that moment on, I loved working and living in a tourist town, because it was, before that, it was a bunch of Tourons. And then it was like, no, they are our guests. It was, we called them the Cityots because they came from the Twin Cities. Cityots. And then it was like, no, I get to live here, and they're vacationing. So my job is to like actually not be so self-oriented and be, it honestly was one of those moments of like sanctifying the workplace that I would not have had the language for as a 16-year-old. But, so sorry, you wanted to ask me about my vocation story.
Or your ice cream story, either way is fine.
Yeah, but it was a conversion, and what it's also a connection with Colorado. But at that point, then, you know, my family Catholic, living in Brainerd, tourist town, tourist area, and at some point having a conversion, having an encounter with the Lord, where there was the sense of, I know God has a plan. I know God exists. I know that He loves me in this crazy way that I don't even fathom. I can't even fathom now. I know He has a call for my life. And then everything was like, well, whatever He wants, I need to do. Like that was it. It was like, whatever He wants, I need to do. And so that defined my prayer for the next 10-ish years, where it was just like, God, what do you want me to do? I'll do whatever, but I don't know what that is. And ultimately I went to college. That's a whole nother story.
It always is.
Missionary. Yeah, exactly. Missionary in Central America. That's a whole nother story where the Lord just cracked through my pride and ego and hardness of heart. And at some point He revealed to me that like, yeah, the next step is for you to go to the seminary. And so I did, and then just kept trusting Him in that. And here we are. So sorry, that was really random about being a candy and ice cream scooper. But that was a significant part of my life, apparently.
That's actually really, I'm trying to find, my wheels are spinning with all the ways that I can connect that to what we're talking about today, which, you know, I mean, even just we're not vacationing right now. We're not, you know, all of these, you're speaking of something that's such a real human experience of interaction with strangers and community. And that's, you know, and not that people aren't going out, and there's restaurants and candy stores. And we did a little, you know, Colorado vacation this year, which was actually really fun. Went to some of the places that we'd never seen. But what you're speaking to is such a human reality, and
Right.
we're slowly coming into this world where there's just less of that. And so that's why I'm actually struck by how profound that story actually is, because many people aren't having those experiences right now. And I wonder what stories are not being told.
Right. Well, even like, as you noted, there's a sense of belonging as well.
Yeah.
And that the belonging of like, my desire to help people recognize that, like, no, it's good that come on in, like, it's okay. Like your brokenness, your mess, because that's really what it was. If I think about it now from a kind of a more mature, I guess, standpoint, and it kind of like, it was all about all the things that we're ashamed of, like our family, that my family's loudness, my family's like abrasiveness, like this kind of thing of like, no, just to have someone say,
You're okay.
someone who you might see as like, oh, they belong here, the clerk here at the store, who treats you like you belong too, is so important. And wouldn't you know it, I knew that as a 16-year-old. So,
that's actually a really great story.
So mature.
I love it. Well, like I said, we are here in Boulder, and I know there's similar stories all over the place. But again, we're coming out of a very particular 2-week period of quarantine where everything's been super locked down, and there is so much isolation. You can see it in people's eyes, and and we have, and that's kind of just, you happen to be stepping in our community in that present moment. But all year, all academic year, we as a church and the university at large have been having to ask these questions about, what on earth does community actually even look like? And you and I were talking on the phone about, we usually have this big fall outreach of, going onto campus and meeting freshmen and new students. And we've had to ask these questions of what on earth is that supposed to look like? What are we supposed to do? And, of course the church is bigger than the 4 walls of the church building, but I really just want to ask you, as I'm sure so many people in ministry and in churches and across the board at universities in general have been asking, how do you not just sustain, but I think actually the title we gave to this talk was not just how do you have community, but build it. How do you actually build community and sustain sense of community and grow these things with our people when we can't be together? What have you done up at your university and your ministry, your various things in Minnesota? What reflections do you have? How have you made it work?
That's a great question. And I don't know.
It's like 12
right. And I know that we haven't done it perfectly, but I know that we've done what we can with what we have. And so in some ways I have to kind of be at peace with that. Like I have to have this interior sense of, these are our circumstances. Yeah. This is the raw material we have to work with. This is what we can do. And I keep butting up against this, like, but these are the rules. Like, okay. So, because I'm the person at this point who's like, you know what, forget it. Let's just do whatever we want. And I'm so grateful I have people around me who are like, okay, say we do that. And they're able to speak truth and say, okay, what if we did that and there was an outbreak? How would you feel? Like, okay. So there's 3 kind of major things that I think I noticed that we have been able to do. The first is when we immediately locked down last semester in spring semester 2020. Okay, 2020.
It's all
honestly,
never ended.
the whole thing is 2020 so far.
Oh, yeah.
What happened was we were on a focused mission trip. Like there are about 25 of our students, including myself and focused missionaries. Every one of us was on a focused trip to a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And we arrived in Israel on Sunday morning. And that Sunday afternoon, the Prime Minister of Israel said that there's a travel ban now as of the upcoming Thursday. And so we immediately sprung into this. How do we get out of this country so we can get back home? And everyone got back home eventually, and we all kind of quarantined together. So like, 25 or so of us, plus whatever students were still on our campus. And there was this sense of like, okay, they're still going to do online classes. They're still going to do these kind of things. But now when we got done with our 10 or 2-week quarantine, then that's when the state of Minnesota went into its stay-at-home order. And what we found was this is the Newman house, right? So we don't have a center, we have just a house here. And so I live upstairs in this little apartment, and then the rest of the house is for students. Okay. And so we had this kind of agreement where as long as you stay quarantined and your roommates stay quarantined in your home or your dorm, you can come to the house here. You can come and like pray here. You come and like, we can have community. And one of the things we found was that with a little bit slower pace, we were able to enter more deeply into relationships with those who are still here. And again, we couldn't still reach out. There were a bunch of students who because they were traveling back and forth with their homes and back to Duluth, that we couldn't reach out to them unless we met with them outside or unless we had over Zoom or phone call. But there was a unique opportunity to just have some life, I guess would say this, like share life at a different kind of pace with a different kind of intimacy, for lack of a better term. That for some of our students, that's what they had been longing for their entire 4 or 5 years. We had some seniors who were still here, and they stayed here because their seniors are like, no, this is my senior year, my spring semester. Like, I'm staying on campus. And they would say that last semester of their senior year, whether that was 4 years or 5 years, that was the most significant semester because we just had time for each other. And that was something that just was like, yeah, we can't reach necessarily everyone, but the small group that's here, we can go deep and we can just, again, share life. So that was the first lesson that just like was so powerful. And that's one of the things I would say is like for the students at UC Boulder to be able to recognize, okay, I might not be able to do like the massive outreach stuff, but who am I in contact with? Can I actually just have that normal sharing of life? That was the first lesson. The second lesson was when we arrived back on campus a couple months ago, I guess now, our freshmen and those who were going to live on campus weren't allowed on campus right away. We actually weren't allowed to see them. Their moving to campus was delayed by about 2 or 3 weeks. And then when they finally arrived, they were quarantined for 2 weeks. So the normal like outreach season and kind of like, here's all the new people, let's bring them in. We didn't get a chance to do that. So what we did instead was we had a silent retreat for all the returning students. So before they got to campus, just like, okay, let's go away. Try to do as much, distancing and masking and all these kind of things. But it was before, normally we get our students back to campus, the upperclassmen are all on mission mode, right? Like, hey, go out and, do outreach stuff, meet these new students, but there are no new students to meet. So it was, instead of that, let's just go deep with the Lord. And one of the gifts that was there was those students that sometimes not all of them, but sometimes they can feel like, okay, the reason you want me here is because I do a good outreach. Like I serve well. And they just were reminded like, no. Far before you offer anything to this community, you're loved by this community. And far before you do anything for God, you are loved by God. And so even that like 3 or 4 day of retreat that was just oriented towards not like, hey, now go out and, do something good. It was like, no, just for you, because you belong here and God loves you. That was super powerful. And then to be able to go from that retreat into the rest of the semester was just so good for them, because it was like, oh, you do love me just for me, not just for what I can do for this community. And then the third stage, and I apologize for this long answer to this question.
No, not at all.
Is this last weekend, we were finally able, after 2 months or whatever it's been, we were able to have our first retreat. And it was the same kind of thing, socially distanced, masks and all these things. But what we noticed, here's these freshmen, they're on campus, moving in, or on-campus students. And I just recognized this kind of fear, what seemed like maybe it was a fear or hesitation, at least, to be with each other. And part of it was because of the university. They've been very careful. They've been asking all students though to make sign an agreement. And the agreement is, I will not congregate with other people. I will stay in big areas. I won't like have these close personal whatever moments. Basically just being safe. Because of that, it seemed like, at Mass, if they came, or after Mass, or in small groups, that they just wouldn't give themselves the freedom to, I don't want to say pulled on the mask but I really mean like take off the other mask, the figurative mask.
Yes.
And it was like this weekend was this breakthrough of human connection in a way that I don't know if they've had ever. They definitely haven't had in the last 2 months on campus. And it was one of those things of, it wasn't everybody we normally would have. It wasn't the massively large group, but it was what I was able to see, even though coming back from the retreat yesterday on Sunday, at Mass, was like, oh my gosh. Like, for example, just a small thing. Last night we had the Sunday night evening Mass, and I looked out and I saw this couple pews of just the freshmen who had been on retreat with each other all weekend.
Wow.
And they decided, we're going to go to Mass together. We're going to sit together because we're now together. And it was just like, oh my gosh, finally. Because I can't imagine, and imagine that right now, there probably are some underclassmen or freshmen or transfer students, first year students who are watching this, I can't imagine like the lack of community, lack of friendship. Like, we would see the individual freshmen arrive on campus, and yeah, they get plugged into the upperclassmen, which is great. Our upperclassmen are super good. They have large hearts. They want to bring them in. But there's a difference, a difference between like, hey, we're sharing the same experience of like, this is all new. This is all fresh. This is all kind of like, we all don't know anything. And we finally got a little bit of that with our ability to have this retreat recently. And so one of the things I would say is, you might not be able to have a retreat at UC Boulder, but I would think that whatever those kind of opportunities you'd have for the three things. One is just here's our small community. We can go deep and just have time with each other. Secondly, here are the people returning that we're not necessarily orienting ourselves towards winning them. We can actually just kind of build on those relationships and invite them deeper into the relationship with Christ. And thirdly, what are those opportunities to kind of to extend the love, extend the embrace, and reach out to those freshmen who up to this point maybe have been missed, have been longing for something that they haven't been able to encounter yet. So anyways, that was a long answer. I'm sorry for how long it took.
No, it's great. The one thing I would wonder what you would add, and I don't want to put you on the spot. What if I'm just imagining somebody's watching, they're like, that's awesome. That's great for a ministry, but I'm just a person in a parish.
Yeah.
And I'm going to Mass again, but nobody's really gathering afterwards. Everyone's kind of making a run for their car. Everyone feels so afraid. How do I have community? Like what is your normal, just, Joe Catholic going to Mass? How do we maintain? And again, we kind of talked about what we were going to talk about, but it just struck me as you were saying that. And again, I'm a family, I have this job here in the ministry, but our family goes and like, it's hard. I miss the donuts after Mass.
Right, exactly.
Quintessential about donuts on Sunday. I don't know, anything you would add for those folks?
That's a great question, because I don't, I think that's part of a bigger issue. I think it's part of a cultural issue that I think we need to pause, and I don't have an answer for it, but I do have an observation of it. And that is, I have three sisters. There's two brothers, 3 boys, and 3 sisters, so 3 girls. And all 3 of my sisters moved back home to my hometown after going away for school and whatever the thing is. They moved back home, and so 2 of them are married and have kids and stuff. And so my parents are still alive, and 3 sisters, 1 unmarried, and then 2 married with kids. And they get together every Wednesday night for a meal somewhere. And they get together every Sunday after Mass for a brunch, and every Sunday evening for pizza. Like that's like, and then in everything in between. So like my oldest sister, who's unmarried, she works at the Catholic school as like a para, like, so she watches the playground and helps out with it, whatever grade. And I just think of how that is their community. Yeah. So I think of our students who will go off, and they won't move back home. They'll move to some other city or other town where they don't have their family, or they don't have people that are deeply invested in them. And they have to go to Mass, and they go to Mass because they want to be faithful to the Lord. But then it's like, where's the young adult group? You think, oh, that's not how it's supposed to be. Right. Like how it's been, at least historically, has been, here you are in your hometown, and here are your parents, maybe your grandparents, aunts and uncles, your cousins, your siblings, and that's your community. That's your parish community. And you have an investment in each other because you're family. Right. And I just think of how much of a gift that has been, not just for my siblings with kids, because they're taking care of each other and whatnot. His grandparents take care of each other. But I think of my oldest sister as a great example of our students who go off and try to keep up their faith and try to keep up, like really striving after the Lord. Because I think, okay, it'd be easy for her if she was in some random city with no one to say, okay, I go to the earliest mass because that's the shortest one. It's the quietest one. It's the one that I can get over with. And then I go home, and Sunday, the rest of Sunday is just like any other day. I just don't have to go to work. Versus after mass, I go to my sister's place and we gather together. And I think that there's something telling about this when it comes to our culture, that we tell young people, hey, what success looks like is you turn a certain age and then you leave everyone who knows you, who cares about you, who loves you, and you make it somewhere where no one loves you, no one knows you, no one cares about you. Like, that's being an adult, versus like the wisdom of, I mean, what do you call someone who moves back to their hometown after they graduate college? They're a loser.
A citiate or something?
A city, yeah, exactly. They're kind of, you call them losers. Like, you're like, what's wrong with you? You move back home? Are you kidding me? Versus like, no, that actually makes a lot of sense to seek community, not apart from your family, but as an outgrowth of your family. And so one of the biggest gifts for quarantine for me, when we were quarantined in, last spring, is those siblings and my parents. They didn't gather. They see each other on a daily basis, and they didn't see each other for months. But I was like, you guys, hey, let's do a Zoom call every Sunday afternoon, and like, we'll have supper separately but together. And I was also able to invite my little brother who's in Brooklyn and my older brother who's in North Carolina, his family. And like, all of us were together, and it was like so much joy. Like, I felt more connected to them on those Sundays than I do most days ever. So what's the point? I think the part of the point would be, maybe we're looking not necessarily in the right place. Like, create a community, super good. Like, I don't have community, so I'll make it here with this young adults. That's great. But I wonder if I have the option of being able to commit to my family. They have the option. Some people don't have the option. But if I have the ability to maybe even like celebrate the Lord's Day with people that, raised me, or people that we have a really big connection when it comes to blood, maybe that's a way to take some steps forward. I think that could be a thing.
Absolutely. I mean, so what you're saying is we're sometimes too short-sighted with our concept of community.
I wonder, yeah.
Culturally speaking, like
right.
I love that. And as a loser who moved back to his hometown, but my hometown was Boulder, so that's.
Yeah, honestly, so people want to be there.
Yeah. Well, that I think this is a good segue into the other kind of big thing we wanted to discuss. So the community, but you mentioned family, and there's so many different aspects of this and how it's playing out in different people's lives. But I don't want to psychologize it, but I think you can't separate it from people's feelings of isolation and fear and everything else. But the big thing that I think we're seeing a lot in terms of community and friendship these days, and in a particular way on campuses, is this growing inability, or maybe it's a fear, to engage reasonably and civilly with people we disagree with. And so, one of the questions that we see so often is, how do you think we can maintain real friendships with people with whom we have real serious moral, ethical, political, social disagreements with?
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. I know that years ago, I think it might have been 2 years ago, Bishop Barron had made a video that was something about like the breakdown of moral discourse. So the breakdown of like kind of like that ability to have discussion. And when we were talking, it gave rise to an example that I had used yesterday, actually, in my homily on Sunday Mass. Was I have there are 4 doctors in my family, including my dad, and then the 3 other kids who are not doctors are just whatever we are. So at one point over the course of the summer, one of the physicians was arguing, having what we call in my family a discussion, not a fight, not a debate, not an argument, a discussion. One of the physicians having a discussion with one of the siblings who for the past 8 months has been in charge of contact tracing for all like COVID positive people in their workplace. So the physician was saying like, you know what, I'm just done with masks. Let's just forget them. Let's, let's lean into this whole thing. And the one who's been in charge of contact tracing and whose life has been like turned upside down by this contact tracing was like, are you kidding me? Like, and so the two of them just like at each other's throats. Like it was a really, what we say, a lively discussion, like very emotional, and like they couldn't have disagreed more. And 20 minutes after the conversation, after the argument, after the fight, whatever, you would not have been able to tell that they had a disagreement. And I was thinking like, what is this? Because you go online and have that disagreement, you go on campus and have that disagreement, you go, I mean, anywhere you have that disagreement. And what it leads to is like this division that it breaks everything down. Like it's disintegration. And I was just thinking like, how did these two have this argument, this fight, and they're fine? Even though they still have the same positions, they still disagree. And one of the things that just struck me was that the two of them have something greater that they belong to and believe in that transcends this disagreement. And yeah, this disagreement can be very important. Like it can be life and death in some ways. And yet they're like, yeah, but at the same time, that's not more important than what we share, what we believe in, and their worldview, not just their worldview, but also a shared history. And I think that's so important. I think when we fracture in our society, the fact that we have a shared history, whether that history be that of this country or that history be that of the West, think about like we have this history in this country, and we break that down along like gender lines, or break that down along sexual orientation lines, or break that down along racial lines. Like your history is not my history. Like, well, yeah, exactly. Your personal history is not my personal history, but right. Our history as a country, we all live here, or even in the West, right? So my experience as an American is not the same as someone's experience as a French person, but we still have a shared thing. And then even greater, like I remember talking with a student here who was kind of, I guess, challenging me, and I don't mind that it was challenging me on like, why don't you speak more to like Hispanic students on campus? And I was like, that's great. I mean, I wanted to engage with, what do you mean more by that? Well, it's like, I was like, do you want me to use more like Hispanic examples? I mean, I'm pretty Northern European in my background and Northern Minnesotan in my upraising. And I will. I mean, I lived in Central America for a while, but what can I do? She said, well, just do something more. And I thought, well, whenever I'm speaking, I'm trying to speak to the human condition. Mm-hmm. And that's something we all share, regardless of race or ethnicity or background, as far as like where we were raised or what socioeconomic kind of thing. So you have this thing like, we all share this common story of like America, if we're here. We all share this maybe bigger common story of the West. And we absolutely all share the story of humanity, which is your experience of humanity, yeah, of course, is going to be shaped by your gender or your race or whatever. But it's also going to be like undergirded by the thing that unites us both is our shared humanity and our shared sense of like made in God's image, but also broken, and also experiencing brokenness in so many different ways. And I think that there's something about this that even the brokenness part, someone could look at me and say, well, yeah, you grew up in, are you kidding? You worked in a candy store and an ice cream store for your first jobs. I had to work, scrounge scrap metal in a garbage dump in Mexico City. And I don't think that's a division. I think that's something that unites us, because we do not only have the shared image of God, we also have a shared brokenness. And your experience of brokenness is going to be different than mine, but at least we can look at it and say, wait, you experience brokenness and I experience brokenness. That matches up. And so again, going back to this, I would say that one of the things that we've lost is, I think we've lost a common story or a common unifying factor that as human beings, we all experience both the heights of the greatness we're made for, as well as the brokenness that we all see in our own hearts, and then in the world around us. But anyways, I don't know. What do you think?
No, as you were talking, I did come back to the ice cream store, the candy store, whatever it is. And so I had the first of this series was with our mutual friend, Father Josh Johnson.
Yeah.
We were talking about some of the racial stuff that's going on. And part of what I was really getting from Father Josh is the challenge and the ability to actually see another person. Yeah. Who we don't have necessarily share everything, but once you can actually see the person, then you can find those places where you do share. And I kept thinking about your story in the candy shop of your teenage jadedness or whatever it was, until you're like, oh man, I see myself in that family. And I could totally feel the annoyance of that teenage girl. You had the teenage girl's shoulder grab perfectly done. But you were able to be like, why is she doing that? Oh, I totally see what they're probably feeling here. I'm not feeling that. Like I'm in a different boat, but because you were able to actually see that, you were able to find the commonality of like, oh, it's kind of like my big family. And that can be, I don't know. But so much of this is the ability to, it's not necessarily my experience. I don't even know if I really resonate with that, but I can see what you're saying, or the ability to try to see the other. Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to summarize what I was trying to say by all those words. Because it's just like, it is. I think that what unites us is far greater and more important than what divides us. And I just think that I wonder if those who capitalize on our division are capitalizing on something that doesn't have the fuel to get to where even they want to go. It's important to note that where we are divided, it's important to note where there is injustice or disparity, obviously. I mean, just to tell the truth. Right. But to pit someone against another someone, or a group against another group, always seems to be fruitless to me, as opposed to saying, hey, we all share, we literally figuratively are all in the same boat. We're all here going somewhere. If we're going over the falls, we're going over them together. So what can we do together? Hey, you need to stop and notice that there's some people in this boat that are having it worse off than you. Oh, okay. But we're together, right? As opposed to, I think, some of the narrative that we've been asked to just kind of, I guess, accept recently. So
I was, you made me think of that great scene in the book of Isaiah when Isaiah's call, remember in the first kind of chapter, I think it's chapter 6, where Isaiah is called to be a prophet. He's caught up in God's throne room and he's like, oh man, I shouldn't be here. He realizes he's next to God's throne. Yeah. He says, I'm a man of unclean lips and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. So what we know about Isaiah is he's probably the holiest person of his time. Right. And yet when he finds himself in God's presence, he says, I'm not worthy because I'm a part of this other people who are really a mess. He doesn't have the well, thank goodness I'm here and not all those losers. But there's this experience of, we know that Isaiah is holier and, not doing the things that the broader society is doing, but yet he doesn't use it against them. He says, no, I'm for better, for worse, I'm actually with them.
And that's so, oh gosh. So I don't know if you saw Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska.
Nebraska, yeah.
He has at least two books. One is, oh gosh, what's it called? Not The Closing of the American Mind, because that's someone else. The Vanishing of the American Adult is one of his books, which is so good. He just, at the Amy Coney Barrett hearings, he had a little 10-minute clip about civics versus politics. Super good. He's so well spoken. But he has another book called Them. And that is how we became a nation of enemies, where it's just us and them. And what you're pointing out as far as Isaiah saying, it wasn't oh Lord, I am fine, they're the problem out there. It's we share this humanity. And until we get to the point where that's a normal way we look at the world as individuals who are sharing our collective brokenness and our collective call to greatness. And I mean, just even as Christians, the way in which God collectively loves or individually loves us. Right. That seems like that's something that would unite us more than anything else. And I don't know And I wonder why there seems to be such a powerful sense that we've lost some of that, where it is, it's a us and them, or it's a me and them, or it's I'm part of this group and you're part of a different group and we're not part of the same group, as opposed to we are all individuals who are human, and you have certain privileges that I don't have, and I have certain privileges that you don't. I mean, I talked about going on vacation in Vail, Colorado, for crying out loud. Like, that's a certain kind of privilege.
On your break from the candy store.
My break from the candy store. And I say, okay, but at the same time, there are wounds that every one of us has that no one knows about. There are wounds that we have that everyone knows about. And there are wounds that we will discover ultimately. And I just think, why don't we give each other more grace? And when I say this, I know you just pause on that one. When I say give each other more grace, I don't mean like excuse stuff. I mean,
very important distinction.
Because when God gives us grace, what is it? He's not just going, I'll turn a blind eye to your sin, your weakness, your evil. When God gives us grace, he gives us his help. That's what grace is. It's his unmerited help. It's unmerited favor, unmerited love. And so why don't we just give each other more help in that sense of, like, if we give each other, if we're more gracious to each other, that means if I think that you might be mistaken, or you might not see something, or you might kind of be missing something, then my graciousness would be, well, let me just help you. And if your graciousness, you realize, Father Mike, you don't actually understand or see this, then graciousness would be, you're going to step into my life and walk alongside me, not as the other, but as someone that you share a lot with, that you know that is worthy of help. And I think that's one of the great powerful tenets of Christianity, is that we say everyone deserves grace, or everyone's in need of grace, everyone deserves grace, which is like, okay, that means that you're worthy of my help. Maybe you need my help. You need the Lord's help, but no matter what, you deserve my ear, you deserve my heart, you deserve whatever I have to offer.
Do you think, I'm hesitant to even ask this, but do you think that's part of what our society's problem is sort of becoming, and that we don't actually feel that people are worthy of our help anymore? We've so othered each other in some ways.
Yeah, no, I think that
worthy.
I think what you're saying is that if I'll say this, that if we've so othered each other, that regardless of your background, regardless of what you've chosen, regardless of what you have done or haven't done, you are either the victim or you are the perpetrator, then that there's something that's like, no, you're just in the category. You're in the category of the person who has been victimized, or the person who has been the victimizer, regardless of what you've actually chosen to do. Right. Then I think that that's part of it. As opposed to, I think one of the great truths of Christianity, or Judeo-Christianity, that we've lost is the uniqueness of the individual, and the dignity of the individual, so that you're able to say, like, everyone you approach, I don't approach someone who has same-sex attraction as a gay man or a lesbian woman. Like, I approach them as a person. I don't approach a woman or a man as like, you're a female or a male. It's like, well, you're a person. I don't approach someone who is whatever race, is like, well, you're this race. It's like, part of me asked the question, like, isn't that what we were taught? Isn't that what we were taught, like, by some of the great, like, civil rights minds and some of the great saints, is that in Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, but that sense of like, but the individual who has been purchased at a price by the love of God. And I just wonder if, while paying attention to people's stories, obviously, like, not dismissing their stories and not saying like, oh, what, but treating each other as we truly are, which is made in God's image and likeness, as individuals made in God's image and likeness. That seems to be something that we may have either overlooked, forgotten, or lost.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case. Which the only comfort in it is that this is an old story as well. That this is
Oh yeah, seriously.
There's comfort there, I guess.
If it's not this division, it's something else. Like, gosh, I mean, think of all the ways that human beings have tried to and have succeeded at othering each other, as opposed to, again, that's why it's a constant battle. And so that, like, as you said, this is no surprise. Like, this isn't like, oh my gosh, 2020 is the worst ever. Like, no. Ever since Genesis chapter 3, it's been the worst ever. So, yeah,
absolutely. Well, Father Mike, I want to take this opportunity to turn it over to some of our students who are gathered together. I'm going to tap them in. We have Kim Rivera, who is one of my colleagues here at the Thomas Center, and she's got some students with her that have some questions and comments. So Kim, how's it going down there? I have muted Kim. Nope, there she is.
It's good. We have a great turnout of students and we have a lot of questions. Again, thank you, Father Mike, for being able to do this. I know the students, it means a lot to the students, and you can probably hear some of them cheering a little bit in the background.
Go, Fox!
So we have our first student. Do you want to speak a little bit?
Yeah. Hi, my name's Alyssa. I'm a student here at CU, and I just kind of wanted to tie the two halves of the talk together. And how do we transcend what divides us in times of isolation? If you were right, the interaction times, like people go to mass and they leave, they're so short. And I think we're all kind of tired of the opener and emails of like, in this trying times, and we just like want something genuine. How can we like make people feel like loved and seen in these like short time intervals?
That's so good. And not only do I love your background, I was inspired to change mine, so I'll change it back.
Father Michael Scott.
Exactly, Michael Gary Scott. No, that's just the way you phrase that, which is, so we have a 3 words that we try to use as the kind of the motto of a big part of our ministry, which is seen, known, and loved. Knowing that everybody is made to be seen, known, and loved. And that's when it was so hard. I mean, honestly, masks almost prevent the first thing and then make it so, I mean, I don't know if you felt like this, but like going to mass in a mask, or going to class in a mask, that sense of like, you even as a person are disconnected. Like I can do whatever I want behind this mask because it's just like half of me is covered up. So I don't even have to be engaged. Like right now, like just looking at your face, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, she's listening. We're like connecting in this way. And how powerfully like covering up half of your face can be an obstacle to that. It doesn't prevent it, but it can be an obstacle to that. And so for lack of, not to try to offer a simple solution to something that's probably complex, I would say, what are the small opportunities that we're presented with that could be those moments of like, I see you. And I think that part of it is, I mentioned to Dr. Powell earlier, that we have these students who like after mass, they scatter. Like they just kind of like, it's like almost like they're afraid to gather. They're afraid to stay. They're afraid to like really connect with people because for many reasons. One of them is that they all signed an agreement saying like, I'm not gonna congregate too much. But when you remember someone's name, and you think about how powerful that is, maybe when you're at your Catholic center and you came back for the second time or third time and someone was like, oh, hi. And they just like, were able to speak your name. You're like, oh my gosh. So I'm not just an anonymous person. I'm not just another number. I'm a name. I'm a person. I think, again, it's so small. And I don't mean to minimize or like try to overly simplify something that is more complex. But I think almost more than ever, it would be, I remember your name. When you're here, I seek you out. When you're scattering and going off to the thing, there was a study that said one of the four top reasons people leave the Catholic Church. There's some things like, science versus faith and these kind of things. One of them was I stopped going and nobody noticed. And I think that that's one of the things that is our responsibility, because I believe you probably feel like you're part of the community. And like, no, I belong here, which means that if you feel like you belong, that means that you've been given a responsibility. That responsibility is to help other people feel like they belong. And so like, well, no, I mean, they should feel like they belong because I did, or that's the job of the Father Peter, or that's the job of whoever it is. But someone remembered your name. Someone was glad to see you and someone helped you feel like you belonged. And again, in time of COVID, that's maybe reduced in some ways, but it's so simple. It's kind of almost like I'm so glad the Lord inspired me to use the candy store story because it's that sense of like saying, okay, the dad's making funny jokes or he's trying to make jokes. I'm going to laugh at the dad because everyone else is going to be put at ease by that. I'm going to joke around with him because mom thinks that he's being goofy. Teenage daughter thinks that he's being stupid. And it's just like that sense of like, no, actually you're supposed to be here. So how can you as a student treat other students like, hey, you're supposed to be here. Like you belong. I think remembering their names, obviously, being glad to see them and doing whatever that thing is that shares with them, you're part of this. So last little note, I apologize for this going on and on. I've been reflecting on this a lot lately. There's two different kind of cliques. There's the CK clique and there's the QUE clique. And too many Newman centers, and maybe too many like parishes have the QUE clique, but that's exclusive. But then there's that CK clique where it's just like, this is your community. These are your people. Because why? Because they make you know and feel like you're seen, known, and loved. They make you feel like you belong. And even if like, again, in our context in Duluth, maybe your context in Boulder, we don't have all the students we normally have in the fall, but the students who do show up, do they know that you're there for them, that they're seen, they're known and loved, and that when they're there, like they belong? I don't know, I think that's really important. Does that make sense? Or what do you think?
Absolutely. No, that's so well put and very concise. I like the specific steps that you give that are very concrete and easy to take and very feasible for like all the students I know here at the Catholic Center. So yeah, it's huge. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I think we have a couple more. Oh, there's Kim again.
Yes, so we have a couple of students to ask questions. Henry, you gotta come up next.
Can you see me? Okay.
Hey, Henry.
Here's my, this is kind of big for me just because I came to the church last year and it was a big reason because I started watching your videos.
Congratulations. Amen.
Just want to say thank you for all of that. So I feel like many of us kind of struggled with faith during quarantine, and I was wondering if you could talk more on the connection between faith and community, scripturally or theologically as well.
Oh, that's such a great question. I mean, it's part of what I was trying to get to when I was talking about like my siblings coming together. One of the things about that is like that sense of, I think of our students who leave and they go to a parish where they know nobody. And like there's a certain level of heroic faith that keeps them coming back week after week, maybe day after day, on their own, like on their own steam. And we realize as human beings that we don't just like thrive with other people, we kind of need other people. And I don't mean to make take a spiritual thing and make it into like a purely secular thing. But someone was asking me today they said, hey, Father, how often do you work out? And I said, well, I don't know, 6 or 7 days a week. And they said, have you always worked out kind of every day? And I said, well, there's been yes and no. Yes, when like things are going well, and then no, when like I get injured or something like this. But for the last 3+ years, I've been going to a particular gym where like when you walk in the door, they remember your name. Like, and I know that like if I don't show up tomorrow morning at 4:30, in the morning, so I'm really tired right now. If they don't show up at 4:30, they're going to be like, oh, I wonder where he was. So there's that sense of like, even like the good sense of pressure or the good sense of like, we miss you if you're not here. And so quarantine, what is that all about? It's like, well, for crying out loud, there's no one who misses me. And there's no one who knows if I'm praying or knows they know that I'm not praying. And there's no necessarily accountability. And I use accountability in the most positive sense, like not in that sense of like, okay, hey, have you been praying a lot, Henry, or not? Kind of a thing. But that sense of like, these are people that I want to be on my side because I know that they care about my spiritual life. And that doesn't have to be a large group of people. It doesn't have to be the entire parish, but it can be that one brother or that one sister. It can be that couple of brothers, a couple of sisters, the people in your Bible study. As you know, everyone refers to as iron sharpens iron, right? Is that those brothers strengthen each other and sharpen each other. The role of community being vastly important, but also community not necessarily being bureaucracy. And that's so important. That sometimes we see like, oh, the parish is my community, or the parish's job is to provide opportunity or community with me, for me. No, actually, it might actually be my job to go out and create community. If I don't have that necessarily, as you noted, like as a convert coming into the church, like, okay, so I don't have necessarily this family surrounding me, like legitimate blood family surrounding me saying like, hey, go to mass, pray the rosary. They might even say, why are you going to mass? Why are you praying the rosary? But then that's my responsibility to say, I need this. So where can I create it? Where can I find it? And chances are very, very good that you're not going to find it at the first up at bat. Like the first time you try, it's going to be like, oh, that was okay, but not really what I want. Or that was fine, but not really what I need. And so it's like, but why stop? Why quit? Because you know that the end goal is I'm called to be a saint. Therefore, and I know I can't do it on my own. So I'm going to keep trying. It's almost like we grow through trial and we grow through obstacles. And so even that saying like, I don't know if I have like real good brothers around me or a good family around me to help me grow. Well, then keep on trying. What's going to happen is you're going to find them. What we did, last thing I'll say, what we tried to do here on campus is we kept all of our Bible studies going all throughout the quarantine and all throughout summertime, because it was like, okay, we know that we're so isolated. But in some of the Bible studies went from like, 8 people down to like 4. But it was those 4 people that when they logged on every Tuesday night at whatever time, like, okay, you want to be here. I can count on you. Just like I want to be here, you can count on me. And it might not have been all 8 of us, but at least it's those of us who showed up and are saying like, no, we know we're committed to each other, and we're going to walk with each other no matter what. I don't know, any thoughts? What do you think?
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, it was like, it was hard, but then once I came back to Boulder and back to my friends and back to like actually praying in person with people, it just clicked again. I don't know.
Yeah.
Weird like that.
Well, no, it's such an interesting thing. It's so good because that's one of the things I always consider the break times as like the real test, right? So Thanksgiving break is usually the real a first test. Like, oh, it's 4 days, I'm back home, and like first semester or fall semester, I'm like, I'm doing so well, I'm praying and everything growing, and then I hit that 4 days of like. First day, I'm like, this is good. And then the next 3 days, I'm like, I am a horrible human being. I yelled at my mom 3 times, like, and then you come back and then you have the bigger test of like 3 or 4 weeks of Christmas. And then you come back and you have like 3 or 4 months of summertime. And every one of those is a little test of like, okay, Lord, how truly patient have I become? How truly generous have I become? How like even I don't want to say self-motivated, but I thought I was praying because I'm so holy and I love you, Jesus. I was praying because I have this guy who keeps calling me and saying, hey, show up for holy hour tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it just reveals my strengths and reveals where I need to grow. And I think quarantine probably did that for a lot of people. I know it did it for a lot of priests I know, including the one who's on camera right now.
That's awesome. Thank you, Father. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Henry. God bless.
Thank you, Henry. Okay, so we have another student coming up. His name's Alex.
Hi, Father.
Hey, Alex.
So my question doesn't really have so much to do with the COVID topic, more what you were talking later on with the otherization of people. So I studied political science, so this topic is a little bit personal, especially in a very secular town being quite Catholic. And it's really about the galvanization of the other that seems to come with election years specifically and with politics generally, where it seems like we're called to, from the lives of the saints, from the Bible and what other sources, to be steadfast and quixotic in our fight for the truth. But walking to this talk earlier today, I noticed there was some graffiti on the outside of the church. And when my friends were praying outside the abortion clinic here in town a few days ago, there were expletives being thrown out the windows. So in other words, like the presence and the goals that we have seem to galvanize people in their opposition to us. And then their actions seem to do it the other way around. And it kind of reminds me of, there was this quote from a priest in the 1930s, these Democrats and Republicans, they're not even American, that we are so separate in our positions from the rest of the people that it seems no matter what we do, it just makes it worse. So the question comes down to, what is the extent to which our continued efforts in evangelization, in fighting for the moral good politically are prudent, and at what point does it become more of a harm than a good?
I ask that great question. In what way would you say it becomes a harm?
I think it really just comes down to the presence or the expression seems to build more antagonism against us than there would exist otherwise. And I wouldn't necessarily call that a harm. I mean, several of my professors have tried to say that I'm a Don Quixote type figure. So really that's not I'm more on the side of questioning what is the line that I shouldn't cross? What is the prudent line?
Yeah. No, that's okay. So if I thank you very much for clarifying that and for asking even the question in the first place. I wonder if there are some things that are just kind of like, this is how far I can go. Like, for example, our culture is no longer, there's this great book, well, I'll butcher the title of it. I think it's called, it's something about the apostolic age versus the Christendom age, or Christendom, from Christendom age to apostolic age. And it was put out by you, Mary, in Bismarck, North Dakota. And one of the things it talks about is that for a long time, the West was Christendom, meaning that for the most part, for most people, kind of had the same lens or the same worldview. They looked at the world, that themselves, government, whatever, through the lens of Christianity. Not to say that everyone was saints then. That's obviously not true. But now we live in an apostolic age, which would be like more like what the apostles lived in the early church. This is post-Christian age. And the authors of this book did a really great job of not idealizing Christendom, because they said now in Christendom, one of the big temptations would be to be a hypocrite, to like put on the face of a Christian, but then to do whatever you wanted behind the scenes or in your private life. But they pointed out that in the apostolic age, one of the big virtues that's going to be required is courage, because of the fact that I'm going to have to say things that go against a culture that is opposed to what we would stand for. So in Christendom, you'd be like, yeah, you kind of get along and kind of work with the system, and you kind of realize we have a lot of shared values and a lot of shared ways of looking at the world, looking at human beings, looking at the reality of life. But in the apostolic age, one of the things we find ourselves doing is like, okay, we don't necessarily have first principles that are shared. And so what I need to do is I need to recognize that I might have to back up even further in order to speak in a way that we both understand. And so rather than it being quixotic, or just kind of like you're tilting at windmills, kind of that sense of like it's hopeless, is you say, okay, let's go back to the apostolic age and say, okay, so how many in the early church, how many seminaries were there? None. How many priests were there? Well, 11. How many bishops? 11. How many resources did they have? 0. Like how many buildings? None. Like all these kind of things. How many degrees did they have amongst the original, like 0 degrees? And you recognize that the gospel has the power to transform hearts, minds, and lives, which means the gospel does have the power, proven multiple times in multiple cultures, to shape the world, to shape the culture. And And so that sense of being able to say, what my goal is then is not, well, back up again. It's like, is my goal to regain Christendom, or is my goal to even draw a line? It could be in this time in history that the role of the Catholic Christian, the disciple of Jesus, is simply to hold the line. Now, it could be to advance the line. It could be to win hearts and minds, which I think is always the case. But it could also be that in this particular season, what I'm just called to do is I'm just called to hold the line. And so it reminds me of in 2 Samuel chapter 23, I think it is, when I think it's 2 Samuel, when David is dying, he recounts the many people that he fought with over the course of his life. And at the end, he talks about, chapter 23, he talks about David's three mighty men. And among those mighty men is this man named Shammah. And Shammah, it says that when everyone else fled, Shammah stood there and he fought against the Philistines and he defended this field of lentils. Like, so basically literally a hill of beans. And he fought off the Philistines against this field of lentils. He didn't advance anything. He didn't change their hearts. He didn't defeat the Philistines. He just kept them from advancing any further. He kept them from taking ownership of that field of lentils. And it could be at times where it's like the Lord's saying, Alex, right now, what I need you to do is just hold the line. There could be like the St. Francis Xavier who, goes to India and baptizes thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who just come to the Lord. Or it could simply be that person who's like, no, I'm going to keep this. I want to be the one person who stands up for life. I'm going to be the one person who stands up for the dignity of human beings. I'm going to be the one person who says, like, actually, that's not true. This is true. And I'm just going to remind people that that's not true, but this is true. And I think that's one of the reasons why in the Christendom age, the big battle was against hypocrisy. In the apostolic age, the big battle is for courage and that willingness to not be discouraged by, disheartened by seeming failure or by the opposition, but to be able to say that, no, it's worth holding the line here. Not just stubbornly and not angrily, but out of love for those people who are on the other side of the line. I'm holding the line out of love for them and out of love for the Lord. Okay, thoughts? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it reminds me of a thing a priest up in Montana told us while he was stationed here as a deacon that it took 300 years to convert Rome, so Boulder should be easy to do by next 20 years or so. I don't know if that's true, but
yeah.
Well, thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex. So thank you again, Father Mike. We have one last student to ask a question, and her name's Nikki. Hello.
Hi, Nikki.
How are ya?
Phenomenal.
That makes two of us. I have a pretty straightforward question. We were just wondering kind of what you have seen as far as like reaching out to new students, like in these trying times. What have you seen that work and that you guys have just been implementing that works to kind of get new students or new people to the parish kind of in?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you, Nikki. One of the things that we've been trying to do is we've been trying to do new things. So I don't know what Boulder looks like right now, but Duluth got snow this last weekend. And so it's been like 31, 23 degrees. It's been very chilly. But up until this point, up until this weekend, it was relatively good weather. And so what we tried to do is have as many outdoor like gatherings as possible. So it's because people are so starved for connection. We started an ultimate Frisbee league, I guess, because people are so starved for connection. I really like functional fitness. And so I'm like, okay, you guys, we functional fitness Saturday mornings. After mass at 10, we have a workout that we do, a partner workout at 11 outside. As a part of that, we've been trying also to like say, what are the people love bonfires. It's just that sense of like, okay, how can we gather in a way that is super normal, but also that people aren't afraid to do. And from there we just had some really good students who have not just like said, here's the Ultimate Frisbee League, but at the end of every like game, match, whatever you call them, they've been saying, okay, you guys, we do have this prayer opportunity this upcoming Friday. We do have this retreat coming up this next week. Or just like, hey, we're all going to this people are invited to go to the ice cream place after this to just have some time. And so one of the things we realized is we can't do a lot of large group activities. So we've been capitalizing on our small group activities. And just thank the Lord, we have a bunch of student leaders who are willing to take the initiative and say, rather than like, well, no, we rely upon this big outreach movement. It's, oh, I'm called to invite some of these freshmen or some of these new students to go to, hey, you guys need to go to Target. You need to pick something up for your dorm. I'm going to do that myself. And so we've had some really incredible students who have not only tried to be creative, but have also been really generous of themselves and thought outside of the box of like, okay, if I was a freshman and I was on campus and this is my first semester here, what would I want to do? Well, I want to get off campus. I want to be able to go to Target. I want to be able to go like eat somewhere that's not the dining center. And so rather than really leaning into, well, we have in the past, leaning into large group activities, we've had people rise up and say, I don't need anyone's permission to put on a small group activity. So even like the Ultimate Frisbee thing started as like 6 guys who wanted to play Ultimate Frisbee, and then it blossomed to like 60 people who play Ultimate Frisbee every Friday afternoon. And so that's one of the things I've seen as being really, really helpful.
That sounds so awesome. I think we should get Ultimate Frisbee going here. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Nikki. So we actually have one last question, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for coming, Father.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, with the pandemic and wearing masks, being isolated, everyone's isolated and there's a sense of fearfulness of being together. So with that sense of something being lost, how do we come out of the pandemic, and what are the steps forward, and how do we actually use the crisis to then lead people closer to Christ in that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Such a good question. It's really interesting because here's one of the things that I have found. I was talking with my mom recently. I don't know if I'd shared like online a number of months ago that my mom was diagnosed this last summer with pancreatic cancer. And so one of the things that has been really great, like out of that, has been this sense that like I've really just sought out opportunities to talk with her, like to just have like sit downs with my mom. So last Monday, a week ago tonight, I was at my parents' place and I just was able to like sit on her bed, and she's sitting there, and I just like half an hour and a half talk about just like life and all these kind of things. And I realized that I sometimes assume that I'm going to have unlimited time, with people I love. And so this has been really good. And we were talking about death, obviously, with her cancer and stuff. And one of the things she had said was, she said, like, I'm not afraid to die. And our conversation turned to some people that she and my dad are friends with, who are getting older, like their age, and have been atheists their whole lives. And she said, I just have noticed that some of these friends who have been fine, like, yeah, I'm atheist, I don't care, when you die, it's fine. But they're terrified when it comes to COVID. Like, they're terrified when it comes to the coronavirus. And they won't leave home. They won't even like say hi to their grandkids. They'll meet their grandkids outside and won't give them a hug. So it's kind of this overwhelming, paralyzing fear. Not just like I'm going to be smart and be careful, but this paralyzing fear. And my mom, again, even though her health is compromised, she's like, but no, I'm going to hug my grandkids. Like, she's going to be smart because she's a smart woman. She's a trained nurse, and my dad's a physician. So like they know science, but there's this sense of, she's like, but I'm not afraid. In fact, there's a family up kind of north of here where I am in Duluth, who recently contacted the pastor, and they are adults who are atheists, their whole lives, atheists, they committed, chosen, and they're raising their family. But in the last 8 months, they have said, we've had a conversion. We saw you Catholics here in this town, and you don't seem to have the same kind of fear that we have. And we just like, wait, what would it be like to live life without this fear that has gripped them? And they took another look at Christianity, took another look at the truth of the gospel and of the Catholic Church. And now they're in RCIA to become Catholic, because they're like, you Catholics, you're not afraid. Now, that's one piece, and that's one great thing we can witness to. On the other hand, there's a woman I work out with, and the other day she said, she asked me this question. She's like, "Can I ask you a question?" I was like, "Sure." She's like, "Do you have like lawn signs in your church?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like, no. She's like, "Okay, because I saw this church that said faith, not fear." And she's a trained she's trained in biology. And so she's like, "No, I mean, this is a virus. It doesn't care if you have faith or not, you know?" So her perspective was, I see these lawn signs in churches that say faith, not fear. And I'm like, are you denying science? You know, because you have faith, your faith isn't going to kill a virus. And so there's some people though, too, at the same time, you can see like the faith of Christians, faith of the disciples of Jesus, and say like, wow, that's amazing. You're not afraid. And others could misinterpret it as like you're denying the fact that a virus can kill you. At the same time, I would say that doesn't prevent us from proclaiming what we know, which is death is real and death is horrible, but Christ has transformed death. That suffering is real, suffering is horrible, but Christ has transformed suffering. That yes, it is. We will do everything we can to protect the innocent. At the same time, I'm not going to be paralyzed by the reality that the coronavirus didn't change the fact that every one of us is going to die anyways. Like that. But so many of us live under the illusion that like, well, I'm 21. Of course I'm going to become 91 someday. And I just think that there's something about really taking seriously the reality of death, that death is horrible. In fact, Peter Kraft has a great book called Love is Stronger Than Death, where he talks about the first thing we need to understand about death is that death is the enemy. And if we jump too quickly as Christians to like, no, death is the way to get to heaven, then we're short-circuiting the harshness and the reality of that death is a horror. That death, he uses the word, he says death is an obscenity. And it's like, yeah, we need to factor that in. We can't just like say, well, Jesus has conquered death, therefore we're fine. We have to first say, no, death is a reality that is horrible. That's an obscenity that we're not made for, and sit there and then realize, and Christ has conquered that. Because that way we can speak both to this woman who is like, are you denying the reality of, science and death? And say, no, we're not. And we also can speak to that couple, that family that's saying like, how can you be so courageous? And you're not afraid to die. This is remarkable. And I think that when we do both of those things, we give a message to the world that I think no one else can give. And I think that is that's going to be a powerful witness that the ordinary, average Joe and Jane Catholic can give to the world.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Dustin. Well, it's getting late and you got to get up at 4 a.m.
I got to get up early, but oh gosh, I hope the conversation was okay. I love talking to the students and to you, Dr. Powell.
You can call me Scott. I feel terrible that we've stuck
Dr.
with
Scott.
That's yeah.
I wanted to honor you. Come on, bro.
Thank you, Father Mike. No, I've had a blast. It's just so enjoyable to talk to you. We run into each other once in a while at conferences and things, and it's just delightful whenever we get to hang out and talk to you. So I'm just so grateful for this. Hopefully we can see each other in person sometime soon.
Hopefully soon.
And thank you for making the sacrifice, because you do have an early morning. And so
I was emphasizing that.
It's hard. This is another thing to your plate and you got a busy schedule. So we really honor that and we really appreciate that. So thank you. For those of you watching, our next installment of the speaker series is coming up on November 19th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Again, it's J.D. Flynn from Editor-in-Chief of Catholic News Agency, Fake News and Spiritual Exhaustion. And then in January, we're going to be bringing Robert George and Cornell West to have a discussion, Is Civil Discourse Dead? Which has this conversation kind of points us in that right direction. Two of the most brilliant intellectual minds in the country today. And we are so honored to be hosting that discussion. So check that out in January. From all of us here at the Aquinas Institute for Catholic Thought and the St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic Center, we so appreciate you tuning in. Father Mike, thanks again, and we will see you all next time.